As she removed the final heated roller, Kathy said calmly, "Just a few more minutes and it'll be done, Sharon." After letting the curls set briefly, she started the comb-out process and quickly shaped a complete hairstyle. Sharon's brother Dylan, 24 years old, stared at his reflection with a stunned expression, looking as though he might cry. "There! What do you think, Sharon? It's adorable. So stylish, so bold," she replied. "You did an amazing job." "Too bad your brother doesn't seem to agree," Kathy added, glancing at Dylan, who still hadn't come to terms with what had happened. Earlier, he'd been upset about the mess in the bathroom, scolding his sister like usual. When Kathy asked him to apologize, he barked back at her rudely. Without reacting to his outburst, Kathy calmly went into the bathroom, plugged in the hot rollers, and waited until they were ready. Then she returned and told Dylan to apologize to them both. He rolled his eyes and snapped, "You've got to be kidding me." "I'm not," she replied, before lightly tapping him across the face. "Try that again, and you'll regret it." He retaliated, throwing a punch to her stomach. It landed, but did nothing. Her core didn't flinch. Dylan froze in disbelief as she grinned. His second punch was just as useless. Kathy responded with a swift jab that doubled him over. "You call those punches?" she taunted. Before he could recover, she turned and drove her knee into him, knocking him to the ground. Then she yanked him up by the hair and dragged him into the bathroom with his arm twisted behind his back. Once there, she forced him to kneel in front of the counter and began styling his hair again, this time using setting spray and a blow dryer to speed things up. In under 20 minutes, Dylan had been completely humiliated, transformed in front of his own sister by a determined teen girl. "These curls won't last forever," Sharon said. "So, Dylan, are you going to be a good girl and use the hot rollers every day? Or will I have to stop by and do it for you?" Dylan didn't respond. "I asked you something," Sharon said. "I'll do it," he muttered. "I'll use them." "You'll do what?" "I'll do my hair. Like you want." "That's more like it." Kathy flexed her arm. "Muscle did this to you," she said, showing off her bicep. "I'm sorry I yelled about the bathroom," Dylan said. "And for the way I acted." Kathy repeated the gesture with her other arm. Dylan, defeated, kissed her bicep, tears streaming down his cheeks. Sharon couldn't help but laugh. Later, both girls left for work at the boutique dress shop, part of a large chain run by a woman named Carolyn. They both worked there now. A week earlier, Carolyn had hired Kathy to discipline her own son, David. That incident had ended with David modeling a fancy dress in front of the store. When David left, Carolyn officially brought Kathy on board. Sharon, now her co-worker, had a brother with an attitude problem too, so Kathy offered to help. Dylan had just received his first and hopefully last lesson in respect. After they left, Kathy warned Sharon, they only stay cooperative for about a week. After that, most of them either try to turn it around or start causing trouble. "I think his attitude's been adjusted," Sharon said. "Didn't take much more than a little humiliation to break Mr. Tough Guy." "If it didn't stick, we start again," Kathy replied. "First the hair, then maybe some outings. Usually, it only takes 1 or 2 times before they quit fighting back." Sharon looked thoughtful. "Have you made any plans for those other guys? The ones who tricked you?" "I have. But I'll need your help," Kathy answered. "After today? Anything. You've earned it." By the next morning, Kathy had already started handling her own brother, Ted. Sharon smiled. "This might actually work. And I'm sure Carolyn would back us. She's got her own reasons to want payback with her son." She had slipped into his room quietly during the night and tied his hands and feet to the bed. When he woke up and realized what had happened, Ted was furious. Kathy entered without concern and casually remarked, "Let's finish the rest of your hair to match that new perm." Dave, caught off guard and unsure what to say, blurted out, "Come on, Kathy. You can't still be mad about that. The only reason it worked is because you wanted to see us embarrassed. Just like that guy Dave took advantage of his mother," she said calmly, applying a bright red polish to his toenails. You cost me $100. So now, I'm going to enjoy getting $100 worth of payback. You should consider yourself lucky your brother's in for worse. Ted's feet twitched as she moved on to painting his fingernails. She continued feminizing him with quiet efficiency, adding comments about his new appearance that only fueled his anger. Then came the styling. Using a curling iron, she shaped his perm into a soft, more feminine style. Once his hair was set, she moved on to his face, applying makeup with practiced hands. Ted burned with rage. When she was done, she turned the mirror toward him, laughing as he stared at his reflection. Once his hands were untied, Kathy left him to read the paper in the living room. Ted managed to wriggle free from the ankle restraints in minutes. Furious, he stormed out of the room, grabbed Kathy by her blouse, and shoved her against the wall. "You're going to pay for this," he shouted. She smirked. "Oh, Teddy girl. I already did. And by the way, no woman fears a weak little boy wearing lipstick, especially when she's the one who put it on him." "That's not what I meant," he snapped, seething with rage. "You're going to pay for what you did." He raised his hand to strike, but Kathy calmly caught his arm mid-swing. Her knee shot up, knocking him down hard. She locked his arms in place and held him there, unmoved by his pleas. Within seconds, he was sobbing, begging for mercy. She kept pressing until his right arm went limp. She picked him up with ease, her nails digging into his sides as she dragged him to her room. His feet barely touched the floor. Once inside, she grabbed a bra and underwear from her drawer and dressed him in them while he trembled, the fire in him replaced by pure fear. Then came a sundress, orange and yellow, and she slipped it on him. "All right, weak boy, here's your schedule for the day," she said. "You've got 1 coat of polish now. You'll apply 9 coats of color and 2 clear coats. Got it? We're having a fashion show at the store tonight, and I told them you'd be modeling. So you'd better look your best. Monica's coming to pick you up at 4. If you want to go out before that, fine." Ted stared at himself in the mirror, horrified. The reflection looking back was unmistakably feminine. The thought of appearing in public dressed like this was unbearable. Kathy flexed her arms in front of him and left, amused at how completely she had flipped the situation. His rage had only made it easier. She knew she had turned the tables, and Ted was paying for it heavily. Meanwhile, more trouble awaited Nick. Nick arrived at the store around noon. Kathy had told him someone was interested in buying his Corvette and was willing to offer a good price. He was trying to sell it, he'd bought it back when construction work paid well, but now he needed money for school. But noon came and went. The woman never showed. Sharon and I both recalled her saying she'd be there at noon. Maybe she just forgot. "Yes, I'm sure it was noon," Nick insisted. Sharon gave him a quick hug and teased, "Those waves are really working for you." Just as Nick was about to leave, Carolyn Langston turned sharply toward him and intercepted his path. Reaching into his pocket, she pulled out a gold brooch. "You forgot something," she said, holding it up. "Any idea how this ended up with you?" Nick froze. "Someone must have put it there. Do you have a receipt for it?" she asked coolly. "No. Should I call mall security?" "Actually, never mind. I think the police would be more appropriate." She gestured toward her office. "Come with me." Inside, she had him stand in front of her desk. A moment later, she invited Sharon in. "You know this man?" Carolyn asked. "Yes," Sharon replied. "He's Kathy's brother." "Well, that clears things up," Carolyn said. Then, lowering her voice, she added privately to him, "I'll tell you what. We're hosting a fashion show tonight, and I need more models. I'll drop the matter if you agree to model formal wear this evening." Nick blinked. "All right. I've done something like this before. When my buddy got married, we got tuxes for free in exchange for photos." Carolyn turned to Sharon with a knowing smile. "Take him to Debbie's office. We've got work to do before the show starts at 5. Sharon guided Nick into the back office and introduced him to Debbie. "Okay, Nick. Let's see what we're working with, Debbie said, sitting him down. You've never done a runway walk before, so you'll need practice. We'll get started with that in about an hour. Hair and makeup will begin at 4:30. You'll be ready by 5:30. Debbie picked up the phone. Alice, can you come in here? I want the team to take a look. Alice entered shortly after, gave Nick a quick once-over, then walked up and cupped his face gently. No issues here, she said. We'll use some stage makeup. The lighting's going to be strong, so we'll adjust accordingly. As for the hair, it's actually on trend. We'll work with it. Send Marlene in, too, Debbie added. But we'll need to do some foundation work, Alice said. Foundation? Nick asked, confused. You'll see, Debbie replied. When Marlene arrived, Nick was startled by her imposing figure and brusque demeanor. In a thick accent, she barked, "Stand up." She circled him once, then nodded. I can work with this. Waist down, we'll use a steel-lined cincher. Upper body, minor adjustments. Maybe some enhancement on top. She chuckled darkly. Then came wardrobe. The team brought in a set of formal outfits, 5 of them, all dresses resembling wedding gowns. Nick tried to keep his composure as 3 girls walked in carrying them, giggling along the way. Debbie gave him a straight look, trying not to laugh. We don't have tuxedos here. What you see is what you're going to wear at 5 p.m. She stood up, smoothed her designer trousers, and smirked. Only one of us will be wearing pants tonight, and spoiler alert, it's not going to be you. Oh, and your name is now Joni, with an I dot. Nick sat there in stunned silence. Reality was hitting hard. His stomach turned. The show hadn't even started, and he already felt the humiliation sinking in. The next 4 hours were going to be brutal. Later, Kathy asked Sharon, so, what about his hair? Still rolling it every day? No, Sharon replied. But I don't think he's going to ask for help again. I'm not so sure, Kathy said. If he thinks he can just walk away from this, he'll be back to his old self soon. Get him back here. He hadn't learned his lesson yet, and he had no idea what was coming next. Eventually, Nick realized he had little choice but to go along with Kathy's plan. With a quiet sigh, he started painting his nails, knowing the event was approaching quickly. It would be close to 4 by the time he finished. Meanwhile, Carolyn was checking the guest list for the evening. A total of 74 women from all her store branches were expected, along with 22 specially invited male guests. As a final check, she decided to inspect the show area. Upon entering, she saw Debbie guiding Nick through a runway walk rehearsal. Carolyn couldn't help but smile at the sight. Considering how he had treated his sister, she felt this turn of events was more than fair. Back at the store, Sharon made a call. Dylan, I spilled coffee on my dress. Go into my closet and bring me the blue one. I'm busy, Dylan shot back. Get someone else. Sharon replied evenly, then I'll just have Kathy come pick it up. You remember her, the one who gave you those styling tips? She had such a great time that day. I'm sure she'd love to see you again. Dylan went silent, his voice betraying sheer panic when he finally responded. Sharon chuckled and hung up. Perfect. He's going to lose it when he shows up. Soon after, Monica arrived to find Nick already back in Debbie's office. She placed some files on the desk and said with a grin, So I hear Carolyn's using you as a model now. I didn't exactly volunteer, Nick replied. It's just for tonight. Monica smirked. Let me guess, Carolyn caught you taking something and told you she'd forget it if you modeled for her? Nick nodded reluctantly. And you didn't realize it would be women's formal wear until it was too late? That about sums it up. She shook her head, amused. Some of these people sure know how to get creative with consequences. Nick knew he needed a way out of the situation, but the threat of legal trouble was real, and backing out could land him in deeper trouble. Monica leaned in. You know, this sort of thing has a way of becoming permanent. Your hair's already curled, which speeds things up. Normally, It takes months for the hair to grow long enough, and they delay everything until then. But in your case, a few weeks might be all it takes to move forward. What do you mean? Nick asked, uneasy. You're not exactly in control anymore. If you don't cooperate, they'll just move you into a dressing area, bring out a few gowns, and carry on without your say. Hand over your car keys, and I'll help you sneak out. I'll even bring you some clothes. What about my jeans and shirt? Forget them. Your nails, makeup, and hair are already done. You won't need them. Nick was growing increasingly anxious. How long do they expect me to stay like this? Well, that depends. If Mr. Brownlee, Carolyn's very influential associate, takes a liking to you, you might be stuck like this for a few extra hours. He has preferences. But the pay is generous. Nick felt his stomach drop. This was turning into something far more serious than he'd imagined. He had no clue how deep it went, and the idea of being paraded around like this was becoming a waking nightmare. Just then, another call came in. Kathy? Sharon asked. Mary needs your help right away. One of her clients isn't cooperating. I'm on it, Kathy replied. Mary had always taken care of Kathy's hair for free. In return, Kathy helped her out occasionally, acting as a kind of enforcer when clients got out of line. At the salon, a teenage boy named Billy sat in Mary's chair, clearly resisting. Mary turned to him and said, "This is Kathy. Either she or I will be giving you a perm. Your call. But I'll warn you, Kathy's styles tend to suit little girls more." Kathy stepped up, flexing her muscular arms and narrowing her eyes. "That's enough." Billy instantly caved. "Mary, just go ahead," he mumbled. He knew he'd lost. "Please give me a perm." Around the salon, a few women who had been watching broke into laughter, their smiles adding to Billy's growing embarrassment. Billy sat still, humiliated. As the process began, his resistance crumbled by a single look and a silent warning. When Kathy returned to the store, she saw Dylan handing over Sharon's dress in the back. As he turned to leave, he suddenly came face to face with her, and the look on his face was pure dread. "Well, Dylan," she said calmly. "Forgot to use your hot rollers again, didn't you? Let's have a little chat." She didn't need to raise her voice. It was obvious who was in control. Dylan followed her silently as she led him into one of the prep rooms used for the evening's fashion show. He didn't dare argue. "You ignored my instructions," she said, shutting the door behind them. "So now, you'll be participating in tonight's event in front of nearly 100 people. You'll be modeling women's evening wear." She continued, "In a few minutes, some ladies will arrive to get you ready. You'll cooperate fully, or I'll step in and do it my way." 3 women entered the room and directed Dylan to sit. They immediately began working on his hair and makeup. Dylan didn't resist. Within 30 minutes, he had been completely made over, styled hair, perfect makeup, and dressed in lingerie with stockings and heels. The shoes were tight, but manageable. Kathy glanced at him and said, "Maybe I'll let you wear pants again someday, if you behave." She turned to the others. "He didn't follow instructions, so this is his consequence. I'm sure he won't forget it." Then, with a grin, she told Dylan, "Now thank these ladies for making you look so pretty." As they laughed softly, Dylan, humiliated, lowered his head, kissed Kathy's bicep, and quietly thanked the women who had just transformed him. Shortly after, Sharon arrived to collect Ted. He was still wearing his sundress, with his hair and makeup untouched. Dylan, watching him, couldn't even bring himself to imagine what was coming next. Sharon led Ted through the back entrance and into another prep room where Nick was already being worked on. His thoughts were racing as he desperately tried to think of an escape plan. Nick quickly found himself undergoing the same treatment as Dylan. As he sat in the chair, stunned, he remembered something he'd read earlier. Some of the female employees had actually started as males. Then came the worst shock. He found a note in his own file saying he was scheduled to travel to Mexico in 10 days. When they finished his transformation, Nick stared into the mirror in disbelief. He could hardly recognize himself. The three of them, Dylan, Ted, and Nick, were escorted to a holding area near the stage where their gowns would soon arrive. Sharing silent, wide-eyed glances, they all realized the same thing. A teenage girl had completely transformed each of them, and they were powerless to stop it. Worse still, they were about to walk a runway and show the world exactly how thoroughly they'd been changed. "All right, girls, we've only got a few minutes," someone called out. The sight of the three of them, dressed in bras, heels, and nylons, rushing after one woman was almost cartoonish. If not for the makeup and styled hair, they'd have been immediately recognized. At the end of the hallway, they found the door locked. Monica quickly took charge, leading them through the mall in their current state. For nearly 15 minutes, they weaved through crowds trying not to be seen, until they finally made it to the parking lot. She pointed toward her car and ran in the opposite direction, cutting through the mall as if leading a wild chase. The three of them, still panicked, jumped into Monica's convertible. She continued the act, pretending they were being followed, leading them on a chaotic drive across town for nearly an hour before finally pulling into her apartment complex. As they rushed past the crowded pool and up the stairs, completely disoriented, Monica remained unfazed. Back at the store, Carolyn, Kathy, Sharon, and the rest of the prep crew were crying with laughter as they watched the mall security footage. Seeing the three of them trying to sneak through the crowd in full makeover was pure comedy gold. At Monica's apartment, they were handed skirts and blouses to wear and told to stay put. The plan was to go to Ted and Nick's place in an hour. Later, the group arrived at the Greenbriers. When they entered, they were surprised to find Carolyn, Kathy, Mary, and Sharon waiting, gleefully showing off photos of Billy's recent perm. The fashion show had already been a hit, and now, they had this moment to top it off. Around 8 p.m., the group made their way to Kathy's place. Once there, they opened a bottle of wine and began celebrating. The women laughed and cheered, replaying the mall footage and enjoying every second of their well-executed prank. The men, humiliated, sat quietly as their embarrassment was relived on screen. "Monica, those fake personnel files were genius," someone remarked. And Nick, Carolyn added with a smirk, decided not to go to Mexico after all. Debbie was praised for flawlessly organizing the models for the fashion show, and the room erupted with laughter as they recapped the day's chaotic events. "Call in the foundation team," one of the women joked. Eventually, the group decided it was time to let the guys off the hook. "You know," Carolyn said, "you were such easy targets, it was almost too much. You didn't even have the backbone to wear those dresses with pride." She continued, "From now on, Mary's handling your hair, and those soft waves will be replaced with curls of Kathy's choosing. We turned you into obedient little ladies, but modern women don't let anyone walk over them. Time to grow a spine, gentlemen." The men left the room in silence, shamed. A short while later, they returned dressed in their regular clothes, but it didn't change the fact that the women now saw them in a completely different light. "We deserved what we got," Ted admitted. "In fact, I'm going to honor your victory by opening that bottle of champagne Dad's been hiding." There was no champagne in the house. Dylan had actually snuck out through the back door, bought a bottle from a nearby store, and returned half an hour later. Ted poured a glass for everyone, and the group toasted to the bizarre events of the day. But an hour later, every woman had fallen fast asleep one by one, until the last.